I'd like to introduce now our second speaker, Daryl Kimball. Daryl is the Executive Director of the Arms Control Association, a nonprofit organization dedicated to public education about and support for effective measures to control nuclear, chemical, biological, and conventional weapons. Daryl is a frequent source of information and analysis for reporters on arms control issues and has written and spoken extensively about nuclear arms control and non-proliferation. Daryl previously served as Executive Director of the Coalition to Reduce Nuclear Dangers, as Associate Director for Policy for Physicians for Social Responsibility, and as Director of Security Programs also for PSR. While at PSR, he organized media, lobbying, and public education campaigns against nuclear weapons production and testing, as well as research projects on the health and environmental impacts of the nuclear arms race. Daryl is a former Herbert S. Scoville Peace Fellow. In 2004, the National Journal recognized Daryl as one of the 10 key individuals whose ideas would help shape the policy debate on the future of nuclear weapons. Their prediction has clearly proven to be accurate. Daryl?
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks, Marie and Pax Christi, for your work through the years and for organizing this event today. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I have a few slides that I'm going to show as I speak, and give me a moment to start this. And they should be appearing before you. That's a picture of me, of course. Well, the security risks, the financial costs, the moral challenges posed by nuclear weapons have been with us for a long, long time, and unfortunately they're not going away anytime soon. Over the years, a great deal has been accomplished to reduce the threat, of nuclear war between states, to curb the spread of nuclear weapons, and to secure nuclear weapons usable material from terrorists. And we've seen further progress over the past 7 years with the leadership of President Obama, but there is much, much more to be done. And so to talk about this, I want to first review what President Obama sought out to do to reduce the nuclear weapon danger, review quickly what's been accomplished, and then to focus on what more needs to be addressed as he closes out his second and final term and as a new president takes office. So if you'll recall, 7 years ago in April, President Obama focused global attention on the need to reduce and eliminate nuclear dangers with a stirring speech in Prague on the steps towards achieving the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons. And he noted that the threats posed by nuclear weapons have not gone away, but have changed since the end of the Cold War. And I think it's pretty clear that his leadership has led to significant progress in preventing terrorists from obtaining nuclear weapons material, the conclusion of the long-term agreement to block Iran's pathways to the bomb, but the impact of the president's actions and policies to reduce the role and number of the world's 15,000 nuclear weapons has been far more modest. So as he winds up his time in office, tensions with Russia are very, very high, the worst in a quarter century. Further nuclear arms talks with Russia are on hold. There are no multilateral negotiations on nuclear disarmament underway. The door to further nuclear weapons testing still remains open 20 years after the conclusion of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and there is a new technological arms race involving all of the world's nuclear armed states underway. So what did he talk about doing in Prague 7 years ago? This is a quick summary of the key items in his Prague vision, as it's called. Ending Cold War thinking, but, and I'll come back to this, maintaining a robust nuclear deterrent, including modernizing and spending great deals of money, great sums of money on nuclear weapons, reducing further U.S. and Russian arsenals, dealing with Iran, pursuing the denuclearization of North Korea, ending nuclear testing, etc. So these are some of the key proposals, but we've seen progress in some areas, and we've seen some setbacks in other areas. As I said, he achieved progress in several key areas, particularly at the 2010 Review Conference for the 1968 Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. That conference, under U.S. leadership, achieved a consensus action plan, which is very important. There was the 2010 New Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty that was negotiated, ratified, and implemented. Very difficult to do given the politics here in Washington. There were 4 nuclear security summits to lock down nuclear material, the Iran deal, but there's much more to be done to reinforce the norm against testing, to secure ratification of the CTBT. The President's efforts with respect to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty have been quite miserable, although he's had a difficult time with the Republican Congress. North Korea's nuclear program is at a very dangerous point. There are sanctions in place in response to their nuclear testing and their missile testing, but no talks are underway to restrain North Korea's increasingly capable nuclear and missile programs. As I said, there are no active bilateral or multilateral disarmament negotiations going on. So we need to be looking for ways to restart diplomacy with Russia. In addition, efforts to negotiate a global treaty to cut off the production of the material needed to make nuclear weapons has been stalled for some 20 years, and India, Pakistan, and North Korea are all still producing this material today. And finally, as I said, we're on the cusp of a new nuclear arms race involving many of the world's nuclear-armed countries. So there are some reasons for the difficulties that President Obama's Prague agenda has encountered in the more recent years: Republican control of Congress, worsening relations with Russia over the conflict in Ukraine, the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. There are credible allegations that Russia has conducted some missile tests in violation of this 1987 treaty. Russia is concerned about our missile defense plans. There was a new deployment in Europe just this past month. There have not been willing partners to engage with the United States and President Obama on the next steps. And this is our challenge. Public awareness and pressure for action today is relatively low, and there are other issues and international security problems that are demanding public and policymaker attention. So it's going to take courageous political and moral leadership, greater public awareness, and meaningful international dialogue if we are going to reverse these trends, to head off a new global nuclear arms race, cut excessive nuclear spending, and jumpstart progress on disarmament. And as you can see from this chart of global nuclear warhead inventories today, the United States and Russia still have, by far, the world's largest nuclear arsenals, about 90% of the world's some 15,000 nuclear weapons. And other nuclear-armed states will be and continue to be reluctant to show restraint without stronger U.S. and Russian leadership to further reduce their arsenals. So that is a key for the United States and Russia, as I said, to return to the negotiating table and to look for ways in which they can reduce their tensions on a broad range of issues. If they can restart nuclear disarmament talks, that opens up the possibility in the years ahead to engage other nuclear-armed countries, particularly France, China, the UK, India, and Pakistan, into a global nuclear restraint dialogue. So that is how I see the future challenges and the future paths in broad terms. Now, why is this even possible? The debate on nuclear weapons today is dominated by the discussion of what U.S. security requirements demand. But it's important to recognize that even according to the Pentagon's own nuclear deterrence requirements, the President and the Pentagon have determined that we can maintain a strong and credible strategic nuclear deterrent, that is to deter a nuclear attack by any other nuclear armed state against the U.S. or our allies, while still pursuing a further 1/3 reduction in the number of deployed nuclear weapons we have. So the bottom line here is that the United States still has an excessive number of nuclear weapons, even by the Pentagon's own nuclear security and nuclear deterrence requirements. And it's important to remember that what 1,800 nuclear weapons on either side can do. The United States and Russia, if they use even part of that number, if they use these weapons even in a limited way, we would have an enormous humanitarian catastrophe that extends beyond the borders of the United States and Russia. A so-called precision counterforce strike, that is U.S. weapons against Russian weapons using less than 1,000 nuclear warheads, would still kill tens of millions of Russian people in the short term and many more in the long term. And we got to remember that today, 25 years after the so-called end of the Cold War, the United States and Russia still maintain a large number, it's not clear how many, but several hundred of these weapons in a status that allows them to be fired within minutes of a launch order from the commander-in-chief. So that creates the possibility of miscalculation and war by accident still today. So under these circumstances, in our view, in my view, it makes little sense for either side to pursue further nuclear modernization, to spend billions of more dollars to maintain these excessive nuclear force levels. But that is exactly what the two countries are doing, and this is a quick summary of the current U.S. nuclear weapons modernization plan that is designed to replace each of the major legs of the so-called triad, the elements of the U.S. nuclear forces that can deliver nuclear weapons. So this is a summary of the 10-year costs. $62 billion for a new fleet of submarine-based missiles, $20 to $30 billion to acquire a new nuclear-armed cruise missile, an air-launched cruise missile, $100 billion for a nuclear-capable strategic bomber, $140 billion for new strategic subs. I'm sorry, the $62 billion was for the land-based intercontinental force replacement program. And then there's another $100 billion over the next 10 years just to maintain the nuclear bombs, the warheads that are on these delivery systems. The total is about $348 billion, probably more according to the Congressional Budget Office. So there are many ways to look at this. One way is to look at how the costs will rise in the coming years. This chart has a lot of detail, but the key point is that on the right-hand end of this chart, which comes from the Pentagon itself, you see the rising costs of nuclear weapons programs in the 2020s. And this rivals the amount of money that was spent during the Cold War. You see the peak to the left of the chart. So this will be a big part of the debate about nuclear weapons in the coming years, whether the United States needs to and can afford to replace these Cold War weapon systems when they exceed our defense requirements according to the way the Pentagon describes them. So there are some options here that we can discuss perhaps later about how to downsize the nuclear force and save billions of dollars in the coming years. There are many areas where savings are possible while still maintaining a nuclear force that is sized to meet current defense requirements. And this is part of an emerging debate here in Washington and on Capitol Hill. But at the moment, we're losing this debate, and it's going to take a lot of work in public education to turn the tide. So just looking forward, and this is my concluding slide, taking all this into account, there's a list of near and medium-term challenges for President Obama in his final months and for the next U.S. president, whoever she or he may be. North Korea's nuclear missile programs are on the cusp of being able to deliver nuclear warheads and ballistic missiles with more nuclear tests. That could easily happen. So it's vital that we re-engage with North Korea in effective diplomacy to curb its dangerous pursuits. As I said, U.S. and Russian nuclear forces are still on hair-trigger alert. We have a number of incidents involving NATO and Russian forces that could lead to miscalculation. That needs to be dealt with. We also need to find ways to reinforce the global taboo against nuclear testing. So far, North Korea, right now, North Korea is the only country that is violating this taboo, but without the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban of 1996, that requires U.S. ratification. The door to renewed nuclear testing by other nuclear-armed states will still be open. And as I said, the next president will need to find ways to renew discussions with Russia on deeper nuclear reductions and to try to find a formula to initiate multilateral disarmament talks with the other nuclear-armed countries around the world, which are slowly but steadily improving and increasing their nuclear weapons capabilities. And finally, the debate about the excessive nuclear weapons spending that is looming on the horizon that will crowd out other opportunities to spend tax dollars to deal with human needs, other security needs. This is going to be a major debate that the next president, whether they want to or not, is going to have to grapple with. So these are some of the key issues that I see that we need to deal with. And let me just note that there's more information on our website, armscontrol.org, and also an excellent article by Jerry Powers, who is on the evolving Catholic perspective on disarmament. That was in the May 2015 issue of our journal Arms Control Today. So I'll stop there. Marie, thank you very much. I think we should be back to the main screen.